Hey, welcome back. Thanks for sticking around through all these videos. This is the final one in the series where we're finally going to hit render and produce the final images for this concept. So now that we have our digital puppet in Character Creator 5 and we have all the textures ready from Substance 3D Painter, the next step is to set up some poses for rendering. So I want to create a dynamic pose, something that feels almost like a frame taken out of an action shot or an action video. So from the Pack tab in the Content window, under Motion and Animation section, I've downloaded and purchased some of the content packs. So I'm going to use this parkour pack, which I think will be a great starting point for this kind of action shot or action pose. So you can browse the library and all you need to do is drag and drop the animation onto the character just to test it out. And that's how easy it is to bring your character to life. Now from the animation player, you can scrub through the timeline and kind of like find a frame that looks good or something that you think has potential. And of course, you can tweak it a little bit more after. So for this concept, I think this one works nicely. I feel like the character is kind of like running towards something or charging towards something. And of course, like I said, we can refine the pose. So we're going to use this as a starting point. Let's go ahead and go to the Modify tab. And under the Motion section, we can click on Edit Pose. And this opens up a window where you can select the body joints to move or to rotate them and basically refine or fine-tune that original pose. I usually toggle off the dots since I think they're a little bit distracting, but feel free to leave them on. And then we can spend a little bit of time here tweaking the pose, rotating the camera so that you can see it from different angles and adjust the balance of the pose so that it feels like it has weight and there's, gravity, if that's obviously what you want, but there is actually weight in the character and that sort of thing. I think it helps to have a clear idea of what you want to create or what pose you want to convey. And that way you're not just moving limbs aimlessly and, it could be a bit of a waste of time if you just kind of like playing with the puppet, but we don't know what the aim is or what you're trying to create. So it's good to have some kind of like references for this as well. I started with the idea of a running shot. So just like thinking that the character could be running, but then I decided that, add a little bit of backstory. And I'm kind of imagining that as the character is running, he's also kind of like charging a spell or creating some kind of energy field between his hands. Because, the little elements that I created in the suit for the fingertips and the gloves are actually conductors that are channeling the energy and he's just holding it just before he's going to throw it or something like that, right? So that just gives it a tiny bit of backstory and that allows me to justify a specific pose or a specific idea that I'm going for with this character. So yeah, the goal is to capture that, let's say, precise moment, that sort of build up before releasing that energy. And we'll also need to match that facial expression as well. So if we have a nice pose, but the facial expression is kind of like neutral, it doesn't really sell the idea. So let's go ahead and do that. So to edit the expression, we need to click on Edit Facial from the same Motion section. And it's just another button in there. And just like we did with the body or like the animation, you can choose from different presets that come with CC5, and those are under the Expressions tab. You can also click on the Expression Style dropdown and pick a base emotion. And I'm just going to go for, I think an angry one works well here as a starting point. Again, we can tweak it as much as we want to, but I think for what I'm trying to create, that sort of charging and angry expression might work just fine. All right, so once you pick the base expression, we can switch to the Muscles tab where we can refine that expression manually. So this tool works just like the morphs controls that we talked about earlier when we initially set up the body in the first video. And all you need to do is select the area of the face that you want to adjust or manipulate, and it will be highlighted in this green color. And all you need to do is use the middle mouse button to click around and move it and just drag it around to see what that portion of the face actually does in the expression. That's it. After a few tweaks, the pose and the expressions are ready and we are ready to move on. I'm going to go ahead and also save this pose to my custom pose folder just so that I can create other poses and reuse these later on. And in fact, I can reuse the same pose in other projects with other characters that I create. So it's just something simple that makes sense to build up your own library of custom poses. And to be honest, that's the beauty of this whole setup, this whole pipeline, right? You have a fully rigged digital puppet that you can pose, you can animate, you can render however you like in as many poses and with as many expressions as you want. The hard part of the job is already done. This is just like the fun way of finalizing and presenting your character. All right, so speaking of presentation and rendering, we are now in the final part of this entire pipeline, the rendering stage. So let's go ahead and send our pose character to CC5 into Marmoset Toolbag 5 just with a few clicks. The first thing we need to do is download the CC Auto Setup plugin for Marmoset Toolbag. It is a free plugin that you can grab from the Reallusion website. So just go ahead and download it. It's very, very simple. The installation is super easy, and they have documentation that explains it very clearly. So I'm not going to get into that. It's literally just moving one folder into a specific folder that Marmoset uses to read plugins. That's it. That's the installation. But I already have it installed, so I'm just going to open up Marmoset Toolbag 5. And once it's open, to find the plugin, I'm going to go to the Edit menu, then Plugins, and then CC Auto Setup for Marmoset Toolbag, and click on the Character Creator and iClone Auto Setup. You'll see a small window appear here, and that just means that the plugin is working. Now we can go ahead and go back to CC5 and send everything to Marmoset. So in CC5, let's select all the pieces that we want to export. Let's go to File, Export, and then click on FBX. Now from here, from the XBX, we're going to choose the clothed character so that it includes everything else that we added, all the, the chest pieces and the armor and everything that we created outside of CC5. Now in the export settings of the XBX, we're going to select the Marmoset Toolbag from this target tool preset dropdown. That's it. Under the FBX option below, we can just go ahead and make sure that the export type is set to mesh and motion, since we are exporting a pose character. Otherwise, it will just create a T pose or an A pose character without any motion or any pose. So make sure that this is selected, mesh and motion. And of course, because we use an animation, make sure that the current pose is selected in this section right here. So we're not going to export an entire animation. We just go for the current pose. That's it. Let's go ahead and leave everything else as default and just click on export. This process will generate the FBX. It also generates a JSON file and of course a folder with all the textures that we need to set up in Marmoset. All right, so once that process is finished, we're going to head back to Marmoset Toolbag 5. And from the plugin window, we're going to click on these three dots next to the FBX files so that we can find the path and we can load it. So find the FBX in whatever folder you exported to, select it to load it. And this, by the way, also automatically detects the JSON file as well. And that's it. From the plugin, we're going to click on import. And after a short wait, done. We have everything set up in Marmoset, including lighting, as well as all the materials that are used for this character. How cool is that? This plugin is really cool. It also includes lighting presets and other settings, which, I think they're great starting points if you want to use them. But I like to create my own setup. Generally, that's what I prefer to do. I enjoy the process of building things from scratch. So I'm just going to collapse those for now and create my own. And the truth is that we could render straight away. This is already a good render. But let's go ahead and tweak things a little bit more so that we can match the background story. That sort of like idea of the character charging with some energy field. First, I'm going to turn off the world folder. That's something that the plugin creates, which, it has all the settings and all the lights, rather, which controls the default lights that are set up automatically by the plugin. So instead of all that, I'm just going to click on the sky object here, and I'm going to pick a different HDR image for my, let's call it the ambient lighting. I want something with a low contrast, a little bit darker, so that I can set up the lighting manually and have a bit more control over my key light, my rim lights, and all of that good stuff. All right, so once you choose something that you like for your ambient light, I'm going to bring back the world folder again and disable all the lights except one. And I'm going to choose that one, of course, to start editing. But I also noticed that the emissive channel of the suit are, it's a little bit dim, so it's not very prominent. I'm going to double click on the mesh, and you can do that with any mesh, and it opens up the material properties. So that's very easy. So selecting the chest piece, we double click on that, it shows the material. We can go to the emissive intensity and we can push that. And we can do it with any other material that has the same sort of deal, the same emissiveness. But that's it. Let's go ahead and go back to the lights. The default ones are good, but we can tweak the colors and the position a little bit just to slightly enhance and refine the look of this character. Because, you can use presets, but not every preset is going to give you what you want, depending on the pose that you have, the design choices that you made when you create, let's say, the suit in this case, and overall the mood that you want to convey with your character. So it's very important that even if you use a preset, that you customize it so that it brings to the light all of those things that you wanna create and you wanna show in your design. By the way, just a quick tip that has nothing to do with the light. Some of the meshes, when they are imported into Marmoset from CC5, they actually come with displacement map, which are really, really handy in specific things. So for example, the eyes. If you open up the displacement section of the eyes material, you can adjust the scale of that displacement, and that will subtly change the curvature of the iris. So you can make that the sort of concave or convex shape a bit more prominent. And those little extra details, I think, that's what makes the difference. So, just thought I'd mention it in case you want to spend some time on that. All right, so to create the custom lighting setup, I like to split my workspace in 2 views. I set one to draft quality or just grade, to be honest, it's just more than enough. And this is just so that we can keep things lighter in terms of performance. Then let's go ahead and create a spotlight. And we're gonna place this. So from the top left of the interface of my right-hand side of my right window, that drop down right here, let's go ahead and change the main camera to the new light. So you can actually select lights and look through the lights. So essentially what we're doing here is we're setting the light's point of view as the viewport, as the camera in a way. So it's like looking through the light itself. Now I can toggle off the world lighting and just so that we can see more the effect of the light and we can move it around. Now the cool thing is that while we move the light itself from one of the window, we see the result in real time of the rendering window of the camera angle that we are actually going to render. I'm gonna probably boost the brightness a little bit more just for now so that we can really see what is happening and we can fine tune it later. And honestly, I think that this is the most intuitive way of positioning lights, that you can actually look through the light. So give it a go. You can replicate the same idea in multiple software, not just this one, but you can use a window for placement and another window for rendering results, and it's pretty easy to visualize the changes. All right, so once the key light is in place, I'm gonna repeat the process to create rim lights and any other supporting lights to enhance this final render. And to sell the effect of this sort of energy charging between the character's hands and all of that good stuff, I'm gonna add a Omni light. And let's go ahead and make it blue, or any color that comes to mind when you think about this energy. So that's it. We have an energy light coming through. And Omni lights are just point lights. So they radiate light equally in all directions. And they're perfect for simulating this kind of like energy orb, or if you're doing like a glowing spell or anything like that, they will be perfect for that. And once the main lights are positioned, I'm gonna go ahead and check again the ambient light. Maybe swap to a different HDR just to add better contrast. Again, I tend to spend a little bit of time playing around with this, but I'm just gonna choose this, maybe this forest one works nicely, so I'm just gonna stick with that. All right, perfect. We have our lighting. Now we can go ahead and set up the render settings and create an actual camera so that we can produce the image. So I'm gonna create a camera first, and I'm gonna name it render. And from the rendering settings tab, I'm gonna define the resolution and of course the aspect ratio of my final render. I'm gonna go for some kind of like portrait type of format so that we can see the full body of the character. And also with the render camera selected, under the tone mapping, I'm gonna switch from AGX to ACES or ACES. Then under the lens, we can also adjust the field of view. And this helps you to either exaggerate the perspective or flatten it a little bit, depending on what look are you gonna go for. In my case, I think this is fine. So we're gonna move to the focus section. In this section, I'm gonna enable depth of field. I'm gonna set it to ray traced and enable the sticky focus. This lets you select a point that will stay sharp, that will stick to a specific object or to a specific point, even if you move the camera around. So I'm gonna use the middle click on my mouse to click on the eye of the character, and that will be my focal point. That's usually what I do when I render characters. I always focus on the eyes. Then by adjusting the aperture of the camera lens, I can control how much blur appears, let's say, in the areas that are further from that focal point. So let's say the hand at the back is a little bit more blurry than the face. So that sort of thing. And this simply allows you to create a more photographic or more cinematic effect. All right, we're almost done. The final thing I wanna do is find a better camera angle, making sure that I avoid tangents or any awkward overlaps. And those usually are the tension points that are created in terms of the silhouette of the character when you have an edge that is very, very close to another edge. So in my case, it could be the foot that is at the back, close to let's say the left leg of the character. So I'm gonna make sure that there is enough space in between them and that sort of thing. So that helps in terms of the composition and how you read the character. And to ground the character for the presentation, I'm gonna add a shadow catcher. This is just a simple transparent plane that captures all the cast shadows so that it feels like the character is actually stepping into something and not floating in the air. And finally, the render settings. Make sure that you add the render camera under the render camera section. Otherwise, it will just render out the default main viewport from the main camera. That's it. Once we do this, we can go to the render menu and click on all images to render out the final image. All right, so to wrap up this entire series, I just want to show you the final raw render that comes straight from Marmoset, which is really, really nice and very well defined, very, very sharp and bright. And then I'm going to show you on the right-hand side this is usually what I do in terms of compositing once I send it to Photoshop. This is the reason I render things with transparency, so that I have the ability to maybe add a little bit of a background, paint over some kind of like haze, or just something that makes the character pop a bit more, so that it's not just an empty black background. So I do that with in Photoshop, and I also add some atmospheric features like the dust particles and things like that, just to create a much more engaging visual than just the render of a character against a plain background. And that works for me, and that is something that I enjoy doing. So I wanted to show you that that extra step that goes after you have the final render. There's always something that you can do to improve it. There's always something that you can do to make it look nicer and more custom after the final render. Now, I also mentioned this thing about the digital puppet, right? So I went ahead and I created a few more poses with the same character, following exactly the same process to transfer the pose or the CC character into Marmoset, and I rendered them out as well. So these are a couple of additional renders. It has the same process, the same sort of setup and render, and I just created a bit of compositing to build a little story around these three poses, or these events, let's say, that brought this character into this sort of charging this energy. So it was just like walking around, it found this crystal or this energy, this thing, and then it sort of like possessed him or changed his his personality, and now is kind of like fighting and charging and that sort of thing. Anyway, this is just part of the story that I'm making up as I go, but I think it's a good idea to have this type of thought process as you design things, so that you can create something that feels grounded and that it feels that it has some unity. But with this, I'm wrapping up another full pipeline series from a base mesh creation in Character Creator 5 all the way to a final rendering in Marmoset Toolbag 5. I hope that you find this whole series useful. Let me know what you think in the comments, or if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer those, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.